Okay, thank you very much. Welcome everybody to this session of ESOF 2020, a sustainable bioeconomy, a global challenge for a shared future. My name is Kevin O'Connor. I'm Director of BiOrbic Science Foundation Ireland Bioeconomy Research Centre in Ireland, and I'm the convener of this session. The session will last 1.5 hours. We'll have speeches for approximately 1 hour, followed by 30 minutes of discussion, questions and answers. I've asked our speakers to present their perspective and vision for a sustainable bioeconomy in the context of a just transition from a fossil to a bio-based economy, and the role of the bioeconomy in addressing climate change. They each will have 7 minutes to present, and I will be keeping very strictly to time. I'm delighted to have such a fantastic lineup of world-leading experts, pioneers in their field from both public and private sector, to give us their thoughts and their perspectives. I will introduce each speaker very briefly before their speech, but for now, just to let you know, we have John Bell and Natalie South from the European Commission. We have Katya Bastioli from Novamont and Marcel Bibbles from Corbion, both leading bio-based industries. Philippe Mongal, Director from the Public-Private Partnership Bio-Based Industries Joint Undertaking. Oana Niago from Copa Cogeca, European Farmers and Cooperative Organization. Lena Lange, who's a bioeconomy expert with industrial and academic expertise from Denmark. And Yvonne Buckley, Professor and Chair of Zoology at Trinity College Dublin. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to John Bell, who's Director of Healthy Planet at DG Research and Innovation at the European Commission. John, the floor is yours. And I'm going to move to the next slide.
Good morning, everybody. John Bell here from the Healthy Planet Director of the European Commission. And thanks to Kevin and ESOF. ESOF is a major event at a critical moment for researchers, innovators, policymakers, educators and communicators alike. There's 3 points I want to make here. The European Union is embarked on what we call the Great Transition, climate neutrality by 2050, addressing biodiversity collapse, adaptation of our economy, society and ecology, and a fair and just transition for the people working there, whether you're a farmer, an innovator, or working in different aspects of the economy. The second point is that the major challenge of the century is the reconciliation of the biosphere and the economy. This is the century's critical task, and the bioeconomy is at its center in most of the areas of difficulty. And thirdly, arising from the first 2 points, science has to move from being an observer to being an actor, moving from observation to prediction, to setting direction with research and innovation, to de-risk, demonstrate and democratically decide the new destinations that we have to set in a fair and just way. Next slide, please. So the European Union's Green Deal, you've heard a lot about. It is in essence the next mission of the European Union. We started with peace from coal and steel, then we built the common market around notably agriculture, then we worked for the reunification of the continent, the creation of the Eurozone, and now the Green Deal, which is on one level a system shift to a sustainable climate neutral Europe by 2050, but it also has a series of policies that have been or are being adopted. My colleague Natalie will talk us through some of that in the area of agriculture, but it's about these great transitions. There are 8 big policy areas, whether we're talking about biodiversity, circular economy, pollution, climate adaptation, climate neutrality, industry. These are systemic changes, and the bioeconomy is very much at the heart of a lot of those. So we're going to have to try and start setting direction by design. It's like thinking if you knew the Industrial Revolution was coming up in the 1850s and setting out how you would get there, that's where we are. And science must be at the center. The COVID recovery, which again shows the interaction between life forms on Earth and the human economy and the economy itself, the recovery process will require a massive redirection of investment that we haven't seen for generations to accelerate this transition to a green and sustainable and a digital fair transition. And there's a huge amount of funding will be put in place to do this, and we'll come back to this no doubt in the discussion. So research and innovation now must step in to the role of setting long-term direction, ensuring transitions, breakthroughs, building the evidence, the new models, putting in place the observation systems, and producing prediction-based advice, demonstrating de-risking, and allowing for the investment at scale that will mean a new destination is there in terms of the way in which we live and work and interact with our planet. Science, in other words, must become the vernacular language of sustainability. And as they used to say that poets were the unacknowledged legislators of the past, science has become the unacknowledged legislator of the future. So it's a critical moment in transition. Next slide. On the bioeconomy, the bioeconomy sits in right at the center of many of these transitions. Third slide, please. Sustainable bioeconomy is now at the center of alignment of this biosphere and the economy in all its different aspects. Whether we're talking about specific issues like sustainable biomass, decarbonisation of land use, agri-food systems, circular resource-efficient nutrients, defossilized bio-based industry, zero-waste systems, land and sea optimization, new sources of biomass like algae, or the public health issues that we're now living with, which is the first, I'm sure, of many new ways of understanding how we interact with a changing planet. It's critical to frame the trade-offs and set direction in terms of assumptions about renewable energy sources, land use, and some of the issues there, notably the issues of planetary boundaries and the trade-offs between the different values we want to generate and the different uses of very often limited resources. And this is why we have to have a sustainable and circular bioeconomy policy in which to do that. The new economy needs a new economics to bring home the externalities and all of this, and that will be a critical part of the discussion, no doubt, today. So it's a huge challenge for science, research and innovation. And critically, the climate neutral Europe working within planetary boundaries simply cannot be achieved without a circular and sustainable bioeconomy. It cannot be done, and this is why we need this holistic conceptual framework. The bioeconomy can be both an enabler of innovation and a catalyst for systemic change. So the European Union's updated bioeconomy strategy, which had three major drivers to promote and strengthen and scale up investment in the bio-based sectors of innovation and unlock the investments in markets, to deploy it across rapidly across Europe and to understand the ecological boundaries of the economy is critical to this. And there we're moving forward very quickly in terms of linking this through the different instruments that we have, international regional strategies, through Horizon Europe in Cluster 6, through the industrial investment that we've done in the bio-based industries partnership that Philippe will talk about, and hopefully in the next stage of partnership, in mainstreaming it into the Common Agricultural Policy, in building the knowledge centre base. This graphic describes some of what we're doing there with our colleagues in the JRC to look at issues like biodiversity, planetary boundaries, and the measurement of these trade-offs, and in building partnerships for the fair and just transition with parts of the European Union where there are huge amounts of opportunity in biomass, notably in Central and Eastern Europe, but where we need to make sure that they are part of the new model, that they are co-investors in the next bioeconomy and not tenants. So the BioEast partnership is important there. There's a massive internationalization taking place. So we'll see this in the Global Bioeconomy Summit and the International Bioeconomy Forum in the weeks and months to come. And there are major breakthroughs coming through innovation, like in highly compostable, biodegradable food packaging, food processing byproducts, and high-value, low-input crops. So the issue now is to scale up, to deploy, and move the thing forward. I'd like to conclude. I'm trying to cover a huge amount of ground here, you'll understand, in a short period of time. Again, just to summarize, we're in the middle of this great transition. People are focusing on the very difficult, obvious things in terms of energy and transportation and batteries and so forth. They're the first way, but the really complex transitions that will take us beyond the major successes in reducing our climate and bio footprint will take us into the area where the biosphere and the economy interact. And this is why we need a sustainable bioeconomy and a science base to drive it. The reconciliation of the biosphere and the economy is the central task of the century, and science have a role to set direction, to de-risk, demonstrate, and help us to democratically decide what kind of future we'd like to have. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks very much, John. Thanks for those opening remarks. Very stimulating. So what I'll do is I'll wait for questions until the very end. I'm just going to introduce our next speaker, Natalie South, who's also from the European Commission. She's Director for Quality, Research and Innovation and Outreach at the Director General for Agriculture at the European Commission. And Natalie, the floor is yours.
Yes. Okay, thanks. Thank you very much for your invitation to participate in this very important debate. And I will focus on how the synergies between RNI and the Common Agricultural Policy can help to achieve the goal of a sustainable bioeconomy. Imagine if under the new CAP, even farmers on arid land could optimize their production with a greater variety of adapted crops and turn all their yields into good income. And imagine if targeted measures will support our farmers to manage these marginal lands sustainably and in a way to achieve social and environmental co-benefits, such as improved erosion control, better climate regulation, or enhanced biodiversity. So that is only one example to illustrate the role that primary producer can play in a sustainable and rural bioeconomy and what impacts we expect on the sector. In fact, the future CAP recognized the importance of bioeconomy. For the first time, the bioeconomy will be addressed under one of the specific objectives. This means that member states can prioritize the bioeconomy in a systematic manner in their strategic plans and deploy measures in a tailored and targeted way. So, as John said, the bioeconomy can make a key contribution to reaching the objective of the European Green Deal. And we can say that a green growth will also create new supply chains, new jobs in primary production, and increase and diversify rural incomes while protecting environment at the same time. So the EU will mobilize research and foster innovation to accelerate and support this transition process. The development of bioeconomy needs to be sustainable with biomass sourcing, circularity, and resource-efficient model, combining small and large-scale solutions, as well as the management and the recycling of nutrients. But we have to make sure that this transition will be inclusive and just for all. In this context, we also have to ensure that the primary sector is capable of capturing a fair share of the profit generated. In our visions, farmer and forester are not only providing the biomass in the new business models. In order to generate additional and diversified income, they need to be integrated in the value chain. So, but we are not starting from scratch. Under Horizon 2020, we already identified agriculture, forestry, and rural development as a priority, where targeted investment in research innovation can have a real impact. We have supported transnational research innovation project, and 2/3 of this project has been designed involving all the actors, not only researchers, but also farmers, processors, and advisors, and it's what we call the multi-actor approach. And we have invested around 1.4 billion in about 315 agriculture and food related projects. But it's not only research innovation. The Commission has implemented the European Innovation Partnership, Agriculture, Productivity and Sustainability, the famous EIP Agri, which pursues strong synergies between the two policies, CAP from one side and Horizon 2020. And it has managed to bring innovation and knowledge to those who need in practice, so the farmers, the forester, and other rural actors. On the side, the CAP have also supporting bottom-up multi-actor innovation project under the rural development pillar. And we have now already 1,500 operational groups across the EU, and many of them demonstrating that innovative and circular bio-based solutions can be taken successfully in practice. So what are our plans for the future? We hope that with Horizon Europe, we'll have more resources. According to the MFF, it will be the case. But we have also put in place new tools. And one of these new tools is the mission. That will be key. It is not only research innovation, but it's also a link with the other EU policies, not only with funding, but also with the legislation. DG Agri asked the Secretariat of the Mission Board Soil Health and Food, and we are thinking that healthy soils are the foundation of a sustainable biomass production. To deliver on the European Green Deal and the CAP post-2020 priorities, but also taking into account the recovery plan for Europe, we need to work together at the same time in a systematic manner. And we will have different, under Horizon Europe, we will have different intervention areas. The circular bioeconomy will be supported with a view to deal with climate change and impact biodiversity, while providing markets and farmer and forester. As John mentioned, the future circular bio-based Europe partnership will be an important tool, and we hope that farmers and cooperatives will be better integrated. Of course, digitization will be promoted in many different areas, including on the scaling up of precision agriculture and forestry. And we will make a big effort on genetic resource and crop breeding, and agroecology will be scaled up with an ambitious partnership on agroecology and living labs, and research innovation will, of course, contribute to pesticide reduction through a variety of approaches. So, of course, we will continue with our IP operational group. That will be a very important tool for achieving the cross-cutting objective for the modernization of agriculture sector by fostering knowledge, innovation, and digitalization in agriculture in rural areas. But because beyond funding innovation projects, however, there is a need for structuring knowledge exchange and fostering innovation process. And it's important that the different actors have the possibility to meet, exchange ideas, find solutions together. So we need to improve the agricultural knowledge innovation system, the famous AKIS. So there will be also a new CAP network, a future CAP network based on our experience, and there will be a key role.
Natalie. 30 seconds, sorry.
Yeah, so coming to the end. So with this CAP network, that will be the possibility again to exchange and to disseminate the results of Horizon research project, so that the available knowledge can be used by practitioners and lead to concrete. So with all these elements, EIP operational group, CAP networks, very good research innovation project, and a well-functioning impartial advisory system, I think we have the foundation of a very modern farming sector. But now everything is in the hand of the member state, because they will have the possibility to use all these tools, and we hope we will insist with them that they will use it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Natalie. Very stimulating, and absolutely, farmers are so critical to an inclusive, sustainable bioeconomy. Huge challenges, but very, very important. Thanks very much for that. So I'm going to move on to our next speaker. Our next speaker is Katya Bastioli. She is CEO of Novamont in Italy. They're a global leader in bio-based plastics, biodegradable plastics, and bio-based chemicals, and they are a pioneer in the area of bio-based industries. So when the technician gives us the okay, then I will hand over to you, Katya.
Good morning to everybody, and thank you for the opportunity to participate in this relevant initiative in such a challenging moment for humanity. Our world is facing unprecedented and interconnected crises of different nature and of increasing intensity in a shorter and shorter time frame. The matter of fact is that network capital, as well as our societies, are in danger because of an unsustainable model of development that we have embraced many years ago. For this reason, we have the duty to increase our resilience in the shortest time frame, and the local dimension is essential to effectively manage the transition while being incisive in the short term. Exit from fossil fuels and energy transition and the circular economy intended not as a simple recycling, but as a fundamental redesign of production and consumption habits, are all necessary major instruments. In this transition process, sustainable circular bioeconomy as territorial regeneration and as interconnection among different sectors is a key tool to curb disruptive phenomena, to guide the transformative process, and to achieve resilience. In this perspective, a systemic, transformative, and multidisciplinary redesign effort is required, correlating the energy transition to soil use, soil and water health, food production and security, and the pressure of anthropogenic activities at multiple levels. Food habits, food chains, and food waste are indeed impacting on soil health in direct and indirect forms. All of them have to be taken into consideration to solve pollution problems and overexploitation of resources, making more with less. This is the key. Novamont has been working for years toward the sustainable development model to build a demo platform of circular bioeconomy. In 1996, as researchers, we started our business adventure with the original idea to build an integrated value chain for bioplastics and biochemicals, going from soil to retail and to soil again. Research and innovation have always been at the heart of this model, using a range of interdisciplinary skills, using our patents to re-industrialize deindustrialized sites, to build the 5 world-first production facilities that use raw materials from natural resources, as well as bio-waste and byproducts. First Run is the first flagship of this kind, and we started this initiative. The products we have invented must not simply replace existing ones, but are conceived from the very beginning to overcome problems of accumulation of pollutants in water and mainly in soil. They are bioplastics, biolubricants, bioherbicides, ingredients for cosmetics, etc. We have created a platform of cooperation with waste management and with composting plants, as well as with farmers, see the Coldiretti cooperation, as well as with a network of innovative transformers, retailers, and research entities. The project started by Novamont and now become a systemic Italian demo shows that circular bioeconomy must have at in its center soil and water health, and the redesign of all the streams of organic waste, solid and liquid, to produce a high-quality organic matter, because soil is a non-renewable resource. Nowadays, the EU produces 96 millions of bio-waste, but 64 millions are still going to landfill, with significant economic, environmental, social costs, while high-quality compost is the key to bring back organic carbon to soil, with a multiple effect to regenerate fertility, maintaining biodiversity, and decarbonizing the system. Moreover, bio-waste is linked to food chain and food habits, and can be a raw material for a range of innovative products. Food chain and organic waste belong to the sector of bioeconomy, which is a central element to the functioning and success of the European economy, with a turnover of 2.3 trillion and accounting for 8.2% of the European workforce. For the sustainable exploitation of the sector in the shortest time possible, it is necessary to start soon, leveraging from those innovation sectors and those local value chains already able to give answers in the direction of the EU Green New Deal goals, and then activate an induced incremental innovation process of learning by doing, starting from what is feasible today, permitting to increase aspirations and opportunities, leaving space to a wide range of entrepreneurial initiatives. Looking at the Mediterranean area with the highest temperature increase trend, with a record of concentration of pollutants, the highest risk of desertification, and the desperate need of organic matter, three are the sectors where supporting measures have to be taken soon to activate the circular bioeconomy. First, the adaptation and development of innovative infrastructures for the recovery and treatment of organic matter and of other fundamental nutrients in the liquid and solid stream of organic waste. The investments in the sector of chemistry, biotechnology to widen the opportunities to transform waste and byproducts, as well as the biomass from marginal area into sustainable products, supporting territorial value chain projects and their innovative bioproducts, able to interconnect a wide range of sectors. In conclusion, circular bioeconomy is a key tool for the Green New Deal to accelerate the post-COVID-19 relaunch programs, interconnecting 4 of the 5 missions action plans, the EU strategies and policies of the Green New Deal, to co-create a joint solution for addressing the pressing challenge of youth society, at the same time decarbonizing the economy, remedying the problems of degradation of ecosystems, and creating new jobs, as I said, making more with less. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Katya. Thanks for that. Again, very stimulating. There is so much that industry can do in its strategy to help with circularity, biodiversity, and with sustainability. So I'm very glad to hear that. Thank you very much. I'm going to stop now sharing my screen, and the technician is going to tell me when I can stop. Okay, thank you very much. And our next speaker is Marcel Bibbles. He's CTO for Corbion. Corbion are a global market leader in lactic acid and its derivatives, but also active in functional enzymes, vitamins, minerals, and algae. And Marcel has been a leader in the bioeconomy as well as his company Corbion. And I will hand over to him now.
Thank you, Kevin, and also thank you for the invitation to speak at ESOF. I think it's an exciting opportunity and an exciting time here where we do see that especially Europe can take a leading role in realizing the bio-based economy. I'm very, very glad to hear some earlier addresses. So my title is "We Need to Be More Negative," and that's not meant to be, let's say, more less optimistic on the future. But the thing is, we really have to focus also, in addition to just reducing emissions, we have to think about how do we create negative emission technologies. So how do we capture CO2 and fix it from the atmosphere to really help the Paris goals to be met. So just as a kind reminder, if you look at Paris 2015, of course, if every nation would let's say meet their pledges and INDCs, and so the commitments, then we would still face, as you can see on the right-hand side, up to 2.4 to 2.7 degrees centigrade of climate warming. So we need to do more. We need to do more than those commitments, and that really requires also that we look at how can we actually capture CO2 and do something useful with it. A few words on Corbion. We are a global company. We are close to 1 billion of revenues, over 200,000 employees, and we have chosen to adhere to 3 Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. So first of all, preserving food and food production, then also preserving health, and the third one is preserving the planet. And I will give you a few examples of the latter. If you look at the circular economy and the old linear economy that we of course still are facing, in our philosophy, it is extremely important that we link the circular economy to the bio-based economy. The circular economy, if you really try to recycle as much as possible all the materials and chemicals that you're using, there always will be losses, and you cannot accept to replenish those losses with petrochemical feedstocks. We have to do something there. It has to be renewable, and in that sense, I'm very pleased to read this morning in the newspapers that a company like Unilever is now forcing its suppliers, at least in the home and personal care division, to move away from petrochemicals, and they really are forcing their suppliers to do that. So I think there is a movement going on that is really going in this direction. So the bio-based economy and the circular economy are linked, and I am pleased to see that that is becoming much more of the, let's say, the central theme in our thinking. So if we look at plastics, Corbion is one of the leading PLA producers. So we produce polylactic acid. We are the global #1 in lactic acid. Of course, the circular economy is much about recycling, reuse, but also to renew the feedstocks. You have to have new virgin feedstocks if you want to make virgin plastic, and that has to be decoupled from the fossil chain. So we are doing that. We're using sugar to make plastics and then recycle them as much as possible, thereby avoiding CO2 emissions and also the use of petrochemical feedstocks. So if you look at our current lactic acid process, already if you take into account that you start at the left end with, let's say, sugarcane in this case, that is actually fixed CO2. So you start with a very positive position that you have minus 1,500 almost kilograms of CO2 per ton of lactic acid produced. So you start at a very negative count, so to speak. And if you really make sure that you use the energy as efficiently as possible during your process chain, you can actually make lactic acid. This is a cradle to gate picture that leads to minus 224 kilograms of CO2 emitted per ton of lactic acid. And so that brings enormous potential. But what you see is that we have quite a bit of emissions still. You see it per unit illustrated here. We have quite a few emissions still in the lactic acid plant. And also the fact that we are producing lactic acid, which is an acid, so you have to titrate it with limestone as a base to make sure that the pH remains stable. And making that limestone is an enormous CO2 emitter. And so what we've done in the last couple of years, and that is based on solid science, as John Bell so eloquently put forward, to really do that innovation based on what would it be if we would like to design a process that no longer emits CO2 to this extent and can avoid using limestone. So I'd like to give you a peek of the future. This is our 2030 ambition that we want to have, and we're actually building a plant right now in Thailand that would aim to meet this type of emissions. If you take, and this is a case for Europe, if you would to use sugar beet fields, if you have a sugar mill and you can avoid the use of limestone, we have developed a new process that no longer needs that limestone, and we have a more efficient process where we use renewable energy. Then actually for every ton of lactic acid, we could actually have over a ton of fixed CO2 in that process. So it is showing that negative emission technologies are in essence possible. And of course, you should make sure that you reuse the lactic acid many times before it is composted, but then you actually avoid quite a bit of petrochemical feedstocks. And so it illustrates that we should think about it, and it is not so far away to realize these technologies. And I'm sure that you will realize that we're a bit lucky with lactic acid because it's a highly efficient process. It doesn't require oxygen, so it's actually an anaerobic process and therefore very carbon efficient. But there are more examples of trying to realize negative emissions. Why is that so important? Well, as I said at the beginning, to really close the loop and to really meet the Paris targets, we need to do more than just stop emitting. So we have to use CO2 as a raw material, or C1 feedstocks in general as a raw material to make that happen. And of course, there are several ways to do this in a chemical way. You can do it in a catalytic way, which are still embryonic technologies, but I think highly promising. But of course, nature also offers this opportunity by having green plants fixing the CO2 from the air, turning it into biomass and derived sugars that you can use in the bio-based economy. And so, just as an illustration, and I'd like to thank you for your attention, and looking forward to the discussion later on.
Thanks very much, Marcel. That's very interesting, and I'm very glad to hear that your opening remarks that EU can take a leading role here, and using the example of sugar beet and making massive CO2 savings through technological development. So it's really very interesting to hear. And your time is up.
Okay.
That was perfect, Marcel. Thanks very much. Okay, we're going to move on to our next speaker. Once our technician gives us the go-ahead, the next speaker will be Philippe Mongal. He is Executive Director of the Bio-based Industries Joint Undertaking, which is a 3.7 billion euro public-private partnership that has funded over 120 projects across 37 countries. Katya Bastioli mentioned First to Run project, which was funded under the BBI-JU program, one of the first flagships in Europe. And it is a huge undertaking and has lasted over 6 years. And we look forward, hopefully, to another public-private partnership like it. So once the technician gives the go-ahead, Philippe, the floor is yours.
Okay. I am ready. Okay.
Go.
I can go ahead? Okay. Thank you very much, and good afternoon. Thank you very much for inviting me in this high-level discussion. So within the BBI-JU, we are convinced that the European Green Deal will be a key motor for post-COVID Europe recovery, but also an opportunity to accelerate the transformation of our way of life. The bio-based industry sector offers huge opportunities of sustainable growth and is expected to be a key contributor to the EU Green Deal in different dimensions, including its socio-economic objectives. A strong European bio-based sector offers Europe and its citizens an opportunity to decrease our dependency on non-EU imports and foster intra-Europe trade in a sustainable way. The current COVID-19 outbreak demonstrates again how Europe depends too much on import of strategic raw material. Fossil raw material import, of course, but also essential minerals like phosphorus, potassium for soil fertilization, and proteins, where around 70% of our needs is currently imported in Europe. The potential of bio-based sector is huge. The bio-based industry sector already accounts in Europe for around 3.6 million of direct jobs and 700 billion euro of turnover. But the sector is still very fragmented and is still facing risk in different segments of its value chain. The structuration of the sector and its value chain is needed to maximize the investment and job creation to contribute to socio-economic objectives of the Green Deal. But the structuration and the organization of the bio-based sector should also be a guide towards sustainability goals and a strong environmental impact. Let's come back to BBI and just consider the 9 flagship biorefineries currently funded by the BBI-JU, including the First to Run one. Those biorefineries will generate 3,300 direct jobs and more than 10,000 indirect ones. And for around 200 million euro funding from BBI-JU, the industry will invest 1.2 billion euro. And those biorefineries are first of the kind in Europe, and they have a high potential for replication. The bio-based sector can be an essential contributor to the reconstruction of European economy. The injection of public funding via a public-private partnership is key to maximize the socio-economic and environmental impact of the public funding in the sector, while also leveraging other sources of funding. With BBI-JU, 40% of funding goes to SME, 30% goes to research centers and universities, and around 80% of the funded project report they increase the collaboration between industry and university. So collaborative research plays an essential role here, but that's not enough. BBI is recognized as a success, but we are not there yet, and still a lot needs to be achieved, in particular in terms of biodiversity protection and the safeguard of ecosystem and contribution to climate mitigation. Continuity is key. But with evolution and improvement of bio-based lessons learned from the current BBI. So already a lot have been said about what is expected from the future, but I want to come back on the common vision of the circular bio society in 2050. This vision was developed by BIC, the private partner in BBIGU, in collaboration with 15 other organizations covering all sectors of the bioeconomy. This vision unites the collective knowledge of Europe's bio-based organization and experts. This includes the full spectrum of BIC membership, encompassing sectors as diverse as agriculture, food, feed production, forestry, pulp and paper, aquatic and marine chemicals and materials, including bioplastic and technology providers, and much more beyond. They also include a broad selection of stakeholders, large and small, other European associations and industries, the primary sectors, brand owners, representative of member states, scientists, environmental organizations representing Europe in all its geographical and natural diversity. The vision describes a sustainable and competitive bio-based industry in the European Union, enabling a circular biosociety by 2050. It is stated in this vision that sustainable and climate neutral solution will accelerate the transition to a healthy planet in respect of the planetary boundaries, and at the same time increase industrial competitiveness. In line with the objective of the European Green Deal, the European Union has been transformed into a fair and prosperous society with a modern, resource-efficient and competitive economy, where there are no net emission of greenhouse gas emission, and where economic growth is decoupled from resource use. Valorizing bio-based feedstock in a cascading approach increases the circularity of the bioeconomy, offers significant opportunity for recycling nutrients, and provides durable bio-based carbon sink and storage. Consequently, primary producers get higher socioeconomic returns from their sustainable production of much needed biological resource, help cherish and preserve our rural areas and invest in their future. That's for the vision. And the perspective behind this vision has a name, and the name is CBE, Circular Bio-Based Europe, the possible successor of BBIGU under Horizon Europe Framework Program, where CBE, Circular Bio-Based Europe, has a specific objective, which are currently the following. First, and I will conclude on this, 40 seconds left, if I'm not mistaken. Foster and promote research and innovation in circular bio-based product and process. Second, to improve knowledge sharing and transfer from a research project. 3, to support the development and consolidate of interlinked European biomass and bio-waste valorization value chain. 4, to support market growth and the demand for bio-based products. Drive forward the transition towards a circular and sustainable bio-based economy. And last, foster and promote a favorable regulatory environment for a bio-based solution. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Philippe. Perfect timing. Again, very interesting. It's fantastic to see how much SMEs, the lifeblood of European economy, are being funded by the public-private partnership. And also your mention of inclusion, having a collective vision, knowledge sharing. This is how we move towards a just transition. So thank you very much for that. I'm going to move on to our next speaker. And the technician will again tell us when the time is right. But Oana Nyagu is Director of General Affairs, responsibility for bioeconomy and circular economy at Copa-Cogeca. Copa-Cogeca, I think you will all recognize, is a united voice of farmers and cooperatives. It's made up of over 60 organizations from countries of the European Union and a further 36 organizations from other European countries. So to be able to deliver impact and to be able to get that message of inclusion, etc., to key stakeholders, Copa-Cogeca are a really important organization. So Oana, I'll hand over to you and the technician will give you the go ahead.
Thank you very much. And thank you for giving the opportunity also to the European farmers and agri and forestry cooperatives to contribute to this debate. Kevin already said some words about our organization. I would like also to mention that we are one of the founding members of the European Bioeconomy Alliance, an alliance that is promoting since some good years bioeconomy here in Brussels. And we continue this work with the new Commission and the new Parliament now. Since 2012, when the first EU bioeconomy strategy was adopted by the EU, we have quite been actively involved in the implementation of the strategy at the EU and also at national level, together with our members. Looking also at the title, I would like to say that, yeah, we see bioeconomy, and we saw it from the beginning as a great opportunity for our sectors and also for rural areas in general, not only to enhance their sustainability and better use the available resources, but also to create new jobs and new opportunities. We have also to recognize, after 8 years since we started with the strategy, not with the bioeconomy, because it's, I mean, when you look at the definition, at least for the agriculture and forestry sector, there were not a lot of new things, but maybe new ways of doing things. So after 8 years, yeah, we have to recognize that we have achieved a lot in Europe, from research and innovation to new business models and also new products. And we have worked quite a lot, and I think also the colleagues from the Commission mentioned some of the examples. You can find some of the events that we have organized where examples also from farmers and cooperatives were presented, and these reports are available on the DG Agri website from 2018 and 19, and also together with the European networks, both the European Innovation Partnership on Agriculture and ENRD. There were a lot of initiatives. So yes, a lot of work has been done. However, a lot still needs to be done, and I would like now to link it with the vision, how we see the future, and what are the most important things for us. And there are three. One is linked to the policy coherence. This is nothing new, I have to say, but we need to continue to insist on it, that we need more policy coherence. Then that to leave no one behind, this is also one of the main messages from the current Commission, and also how to make sure that we increase the replacement of fossil-based materials with bio-based material. On the first one, on the policy coherence, yes, we were happy to also hear from the Commission that bioeconomy is considered as a solution to a lot of challenges that we are facing today, from climate change to more sustainable businesses. However, we think that more synergies could be created, and it's a great opportunity now, because we will work and member states will work on the implementation of the future CAP. We have the Horizon Europe, a new biodiversity strategy, and on the climate side also a lot of initiatives, sustainable finance. So how we will make sure that bioeconomy will really be linked between all these initiatives, and will not be in the situation when we have, let's say, conflicting policies. Then on the second point, to leave no one behind, we have to admit that much more could be done also for, we still call them new member states, for the Eastern European countries. We have some initiatives, and the BioEast initiative, they have a great potential when it comes to the biomass availability. And here, also from our side, but we know also that the BBI was working hard on this. We think that, yeah, more could be done in the future in involving them in future research and innovation, and in increasing the mobilization of biomass in that areas. So And we also hope, this was also stressed by the Commission, that the future partnership will also make sure that farmers, cooperatives from agriculture and forestry sector from these countries, but not only, will be strong partners in achieving the objectives, and that more targeted specific funds will be allocated for the agriculture and forestry sectors. EU has very high expectations from agriculture and forestry sector to deliver on the objectives also of the Green Deal when it comes to climate change and biodiversity. For sure, we are committed, as today, the transition didn't start today for us, and we are committed to do it. A lot of tools still needs to be available. It was mentioned also the budget. We need a strong budget for this. And this is very much linked also to the third point that I mentioned, how we can increase the replacement of fossil-based materials with bio-based ones, because our sectors are providing a lot of solutions to industry like textiles, constructions, packaging. So renewable raw materials from the agriculture and forestry sector can provide a lot of solutions, including for environment and biodiversity. And yes, I would like to conclude, because we see a lot of discussion still. Is bioeconomy sustainable? Yeah, at least in Brussels, I can still can hear this quite often, still questioning the importance of bioeconomy for EU and member states. And I really hope that we will all change. I mean, the ones that are still not believing it will still will change their views and will strongly support the bioeconomy also in the future, and that we will continue this great work at all levels, at here in Brussels, but also at national level, and the cooperation between the different actors involved will also be stronger in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Joanna. Thank you for your remarks. Absolutely, we need new ways of doing things, but you made two very good points. We absolutely cannot leave anybody behind. I think farmers, agriculture has been the invisible partner in many ways, but there are projects out there, and I don't want to refer to the First to Run project again, but cooperating and partnering with farmers is so important, yeah, and that project is doing that. And there are many other projects that are trying to do that as well, and we need more of it, because we cannot leave rural communities behind because they are suffering. And partnership is the key, because partnership can drive change. So thanks very much for those comments. I'm going to move on to our next speaker, and the technician will again give us the go-ahead. But Lena Lange is a director and founder of Bioeconomy Research and Advisory, an SME. Lena has over 35 years of experience in bio-based industries and academia, and is a member of multiple advisory committees, both nationally in Denmark, but also internationally, and has many collaborations, for example, with Africa. So without further ado, I'll now hand over to Lena to give her presentation once the technician gives us the go-ahead.
Thank you so much, Kevin, and thank you so much for this opportunity of being part of this fantastic session. So inspiring and so informative. Let me go directly forward and push forward. We really need to make sure that Europe, based on all this, the whole bio-based economy and circularity, we are the right ones to have bio-based economy to be pushed forward in the international top agenda. Big three points of evidence here. Climate, the bio-based can deliver building blocks for chemicals and materials to substitute for fossils. Smart circularity of plastic and textiles, again, lowering the CO2, and lowering CO2 footprint of food and feed by upgrading industrial site streams. We will also have a I didn't add that here, but let me mention the negative emission. We can make animal feed from methane captured. We can make jet fuel by power to X combination with based on captured CO2. This is a fantastic opportunity which is not being included in climate change as such. Also for adaptation, more food and feed. From climate change, challenged African agriculture, as we can foresee, it will be needed. Improved soil fertility, also needed all over the world, but especially for African soil. Biofertilizer from biorefinery, also from wastewater treatment microbes. And more room for biodiversity by saving land, by producing feed, and also from upgrading waste streams, and also reusing the circularity of fibers. The vision and perspectives is also here for the bioeconomy to be a very important integrated part of food and health agenda. Let me make it all clear. EU, if we are using this health promoting bio-based product as part of the bio-based product portfolio, we can keep more people out of hospitals longer. And that's better lives and better economy. We can make it affordable too, because prebiotic food can actually be made for improved gut health, can be made by just the affordable products from a biorefinery side streams. It's part of the plant cell wall, small oligos. And we can also make animal feed in a similar way, which is good for gut health, which can lower the use of antibiotics, lowering risk of antibiotic resistance. Might be an even bigger threat than the whole area of viral diseases, and both on top would be horrible. This is also EU-African collaboration is important for this part of the bio-based circular economy. It is possible to have food, feed, fibers, fertilizer from upgrade of what is now going wasted. Also in Africa, all continent, wasting almost 50% of what could be used or which is definitely just going rotting. It's a huge opportunity that we have so much more we could use. And that will create nutrition, jobs, livelihood, economic development, both rural and urban. There are not many sectors which can say that so clearly. The last part on this food and health agenda, I would really emphasize that Europe is not an island. We should make a strategy for collaborating with the other big biomass continents like China, India, Russia, and Brazil. And right now, as you can see, we all know that there's so much import of African biomass to China because they have more people than they have arable land share. So there is a motor driving this kind of export. And it's important for development, both in South America and in Africa, that they are actually making higher value products instead of exporting the raw materials. So the next part I would like to mention is, and I think I'm happy it has already been mentioned, but it's really important that we have the fair and just implementation of the bio-based economy. Because right now in Europe, we are primarily giving more efforts to the industries already being good. We need to opening and sharing, fast and efficient sharing knowledge and best practices. And I think few sectors can say that in its offset, they are democratic. Biomass is present all over the world, different from oil resources. And bioprocessing, microbial upgrade technologies are also widespread. I think we all know that fermentation using microbes, both bacteria and yeast, is part of food culture of all continents. So there is a non-proprietary, huge basis of knowledge in the bio-based economy, which can be used all over the world. However, we really need to distribute, disseminate how to access and how to use this wealth of non-proprietary knowledge in a not widespread, because it's not widespread and easily accessible to most industries and specialists. Public-private partnership can mediate such transition and be more inclusive, implementing bio-based economy in all parts of EU and globally, because it's needed, and it's a win-win situation where we can really do good and also at the same time strengthen our own competitiveness. The improved resource efficiency is unlocking. Let me give a concrete example. It's unlocking basic by having the cascading approach, you can unlock the full biomass potential. And that is, let me say, just a green biorefinery as an example. Green grass, year-round, low runoff, high productivity. You can produce local protein to substitute for the imported soy. You can make short oligos from the pulp, prebiotic food and feed. You can use the fibers more for textile fibers. Similarly, for seaweed biorefinery, multiple, and for lots of upgrade of industrial side streams. It's a cascading use, many products, not just biomass to biofuel. So strengthen social inclusiveness, strengthen industrial competitiveness at the same time, just transition, more jobs, many types of skills, rural and coastal development. And in this sense, we are really, really moving. So we can say that we have new opportunities in the rural area and for the young, talented entrepreneurs. A lot of hope. Thank you so much.
Thanks very much, Lena. Thanks very much for giving us your insights. I think it's very interesting that in the first bioeconomy strategy, food and health really wasn't central, but now you see it more and more, that the bioeconomy can offer citizens improved health. And that's a major advantage of the bioeconomy. But also you mentioned sharing knowledge. That is so important. Yeah, if we really want to have that just transition with the huge range of products that you're mentioning and the resource efficiency, there are huge opportunities, not just for Europe, but globally. And so I really appreciate those comments. Thanks very much. So we're going to go to our final speaker. And again, we will wait for the technician to give us the go ahead. But the final speaker is Professor Yvonne Buckley, who's Chair of Zoology at Trinity College Dublin in Ireland. Professor Buckley's research interests include determining the future of how we live well on this planet, environmental decision-making, plant ecology, quantitative ecology, and biodiversity. So she has a fantastic range of interests and research interests that are absolutely essential for the bioeconomy. So if the technician gives a go ahead, then Yvonne, the floor is yours. Yvonne, your mic, you're on mute.
Okay, thanks.
Cheers.
Thanks very much, Kevin and everyone. It's a real pleasure to be a part of this session. So I'm going to argue here that natural capital, ecosystem services, and biodiversity are the foundations of a sustainable bioeconomy. So bio-based goods and services are derived from underlying natural capital, which are the soils, the biodiversity, water that provides the raw materials for the bioeconomy. When you combine natural capital with human, social, financial, and manufactured capital, you can derive more and more sophisticated products from that that get used within the bioeconomy. Now we know the bioeconomy, the old kind of bioeconomy based on agriculture and forestry has been driven by economic activity. So goods and services are produced by natural capital stocks from which we get flows of ecosystem goods and services. And those flows of goods and services provide for economic activity, the production and consumption of goods and services, and the bioeconomy sits there as well. However, we also know that this economic activity can feed back on those natural capital stocks in a negative way. So indirect effects of economic activities such as pollution, overexploitation, and effects on connected ecosystems can have a negative effect on the underlying natural capital. And if that underlying natural capital is degraded, it can have a negative feedback in turn on the economic activity. So the bioeconomy relies on a strong and resilient natural capital base. And it makes sense to understand that natural capital base and understand what kinds of investments are needed in the natural capital to maintain the bioeconomy in a sustainable way into the future. So biodiversity is the biotic element of natural capital, and it contributes to the supply of many goods, ecosystem goods and services. Some of these goods and services are directly exploited and they're very visible. They are valued by markets. They have economic values, things like food production, pharmaceutical production, and all of the amazing products that we can get from underlying bioresources. And other ecosystem services are not as visible, so they don't get put on the balance sheet. These include aesthetic and cultural services, the kinds of plants and animals and landscapes and ecosystems that we go and see and spend our money on in tourism and things like that, often those underlying natural capital stocks are not directly valued. They can also provide regulating services. We've talked a lot about climate regulation and the benefits of carbon cycling and carbon sequestration and storage for regulating climate. But our natural capital stocks also regulate nutrient cycling. They provide pollination services, which benefit many actors within ecosystems. So the natural capital approach is all about trying to make some of these invisible ecosystem services visible and present on balance sheets so that we can take a more complete view of what is being provided by ecosystems. And one of the worries with food production, pharmaceutical production using bioresources is that those very marketable services and goods are elevated and ecosystems are managed for the benefit of those very marketable goods and services at the expense of the invisible nutrient cycling, aesthetic and cultural services, pollination, carbon cycling, all of those other ecosystem goods and services derived from ecosystems. So the natural capital approach puts stocks, so the quality, the quantity and location of natural capital stocks such as soils, forests, grasslands, and biodiversity front and center. It quantifies those and it looks at the quality of those and looks at where they're provided. Now, the quality, quantity, and location of our stocks determine what services are provided and who they're provided to, and ultimately what benefits they can provide to humans. And the bioeconomy takes those services and generates benefits to people from those services provided by the natural capital stocks. So that's where the bioeconomy lies. Now, the bioeconomy and its integration within a circular economy is really central to the values that we put around the bioeconomy. It's about the displacement of fossil fuels. It's about an understanding that we need to work towards carbon neutrality, and values around sustainability are very important in the bioeconomy, and values around biodiversity conservation, preserving that natural capital stock so it can continue to provide us with goods and services now and into the future, with many other goods and services that we may not even know about or have a use for yet. So those values that we have determine what kinds of management actions, what kinds of policy interventions we take that then act back on those natural capital stocks. So by bringing the natural capital approach, the stocks are really brought into focus here, and we concentrate on quantifying and thinking about investment in those stocks. So we know that economic incentives need to take into account the multiple values of ecosystem functions and nature's contributions to people. And the IPBES report, which is the most important report on biodiversity and ecosystem services out there, has tackled this head on basically and said that economic incentives have generally favored expanding economic activity and often environmental harm over conservation or restoration. And for this new bioeconomy and the development of the bioeconomy into the future, we really should be thinking about taking IPBES's advice and incorporating the consideration of the multiple values of ecosystem functions and nature's contributions to people into the economic incentives in things like the Common Agricultural Policy, for example, and other incentives around the bioeconomy. We need to design in consideration for natural capital.
1 minute.
So this natural capital approach can be aligned with the bioeconomy. Biodiversity provides these unrecognized contributions to ecosystem services, and the natural capital approach makes these visible. You can put them on your balance sheet. The long-term resilience of natural capital stocks needs functional biodiverse ecosystems, so we need to focus on those. We need to understand where our raw materials for the bioeconomy are coming from. We need to understand how we can manage those natural capital stocks for quality, quantity, and location factors, and be aware of indirect effects of raw material acquisition. So the bioeconomy can actually become a driver of land use change that could be negative. And a really, really important tool here is full life cycle analysis of product development, looking upstream and downstream at the impacts of the product on the source and non-source natural capital. So I'd like to direct you here there's some tools available for doing this. The Natural Capital Protocol is a fantastic decision-making framework, and we can operationalize some of these tools nationally and internationally. And I'd like to bring your attention here to the Irish Forum on Natural Capital, which has brought together partners to try and do this on the island of Ireland. So thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Yvonne. And it's great to get an expert opinion on natural capital and ecosystem services. I think as a word that you've mentioned a few times there was long-term resilience. I think we must think of the bioeconomy in long terms and not look to the shorter gains. But also you mentioned there towards the end as well, decision-making tools. It's so important that the science informs the decision-making. So you mentioned quality and quantity. Often people are thinking of biodiversity in terms of quantity, but not quality. And I think it's really important that the bioeconomy delivers on the quality of our biodiversity. So thanks very much for that. We have run a little over, not bad. We've got 20 minutes left for discussion. So I hear the technician in the background. No problem. Yeah, sorry, I thought you were asking me something. I'm going to open the floor for questions. I don't know if there are any questions from the audience, but while we're waiting for questions to come in, I might start because we've talked a lot about the supply chain, the various actors, but I'm going to ask maybe a few of the speakers to give their opinion on. So, what are the key actions that are needed to help enable greater cooperation along the value chain, from the biomass producer all the way to the consumer, so that we can address this grand challenge of our sustainable future. So maybe I can start with Natalie about how do you get greater cooperation along the value chain?
Yes, thank you, Kevin. Okay, sorry. Okay, so the first stage for developing the sustainable economy value chain, we have to understand what are the opportunities at the territorial level. And so what is important, I think, it's the development of bioeconomy strategy at national, but also at regional level. And the second element, it's what I mentioned already, it's this multi-actor approach. We have to put together the different people involved in it, not only research, not only farmers, but the different actors of this value chain, and so to see a little bit what are the interests and so the possibility of this cooperation. If I'm talking about the farmers, we know that they have a certain experience in cooperatives. A farmer alone can not do anything. They need to be together and to have this possibility to discuss with the other actors of this value chain. So that's the most important thing. It's to see what can be done, and we have good example, and in particular in Ireland with the famous example of Gambler, we have example where farmers were involved in the value chain, and I think the exchange of good practices could be also one important element. But it's really complex. That's true.
Okay, thanks very much. So we look at trying to get the farmers in, but how do you stimulate? So maybe I can ask Marcel or Katya to come in and see, okay, from an industry perspective, what is the market pull that is going to convince you guys that cooperation with farmers and other stakeholders is really going to create economic and sustainable value?
Shall I?
Sure. Okay,
You go ahead, Katya.
Okay. From my side, we have a strong cooperation with Coldirette's 1.6 million farmers they represent, and is a long-lasting relationship which comes from the test and the use of innovative products. We are testing together bioherbicides, the bioplastics for agriculture, the biolubricants for their machinery, and at the same time, we are experimenting crops in marginal areas like Dune in order to regenerate soil. And at this moment, the development is really growing. So I feel that industry, in reality, we have to change the logic of industry. Is not anymore industry and agriculture. There are integrated projects where communities are also working together. So we have to start from the problems and opportunities of local areas. So I fully agree with Natalie that we need to start from the problems. Geological stability can be a big problem, but an opportunity to create new chains and new opportunities. So we have to start from the needs of the local areas. For this reason, also in my presentation, I stressed how essential is the local dimension of the bioeconomy, and also the engagement of people, because visibility of ecosystem services is something which can be brought to people, and engagement is important. And European Union, with the 5 missions, I feel can cover also this aspect very strongly. So I feel that there are many things, but industry cannot be just industry. We have to rethink also industry, also the benefit logic, the benefit companies logic, in order not to see just the profit, but how much industry can to deliver to local areas. And in this approach, farmers are fundamental, because farmers cannot be just paid for extraction of products from agriculture. We need to have them involved in regeneration process, and bioeconomy without regeneration, and soil. So soil is central. We have to teach people about soil health and how important is fertility, how important is, our life is tied to this. And our mission, care for soil is care for life, is I feel it explains very well what we have to do. Engagement of people, understanding that bioeconomy is not industry, is our society, is our life, is how to become active and involved in a new process.
Thanks, Katya. Very interesting. Marcel?
Yeah, if I can build on that, I very much agree with Katya. So what you see is that what we need to do is really create new value chains, and also involve the agricultural sector very much in it. I think that's very true. What you now see is that quite a few farmers in Europe are actually struggling for their existence, and I don't think we're really sharing the value that we create in those new value chains with, let's say, the primary sector. So I think what we should see is that there is much more, let's say, fair sharing of that value that is generated. Because if you look at it, if you end up at retail typically has a very good existence versus what the farmers get for these new things. So I think we need to let's say be more of a director to make sure that value is created and shared better. The other thing, and that is related to that as well, is and it was mentioned before as well, is policy coherence. I think it is very important for everybody in the value chain, and that includes the farmers, if they want to have a more sustainable supply of the raw materials for this industry, we should also enable that and make sure that they can actually invest, and make sure that investment is lasting, so that we don't change the rules halfway the game. And I think in the end, we should also look at behavior of us as consumers, right? I mean, and also that is possibly also enabled by changes in policy, and at least on for instance, labeling. So if you now go to a supermarket and you buy something that has a bio-based package, it's very hard to recognize that now in retail, that there is something that is actually more sustainable than the petrochemicals packaging in retail. So we could really build that better, I think. So it is really, for me, it really is important to create those value chains, and of course collaborate a lot better, and be willing to share value. So as a summary.
Thanks very much, Marcel. I'm going to bring in Philippe, and then Lena, and then Yvonne, because I see that you've messaged me for comments. Philippe, I suppose I just want to look at your experience in the BBI and what is driving collaboration in these value chains.
Yes, the experience we have in BBI and shared by all our stakeholders is that collaborative research was really essential in the structuring the value chain and maximize the collaboration between actors that were not collaborating in the past. And maybe a characteristic, because collaborative research is not something new, but collaborative research performed with a program implemented by a public-private partnership has a much higher impact. And first, it starts with a SIRA, Strategic Innovation and Research Agenda, which is aligned on goals of policymakers and need of the industry. And the project, why do they have this impact, is because at the different level of technology readiness levels, there is always a business case which is identified. Now, we know that it's not enough, and we have been talking already a lot about the primary sector participation. That's why for the successor of the BBI, we want to include them also at the level of the governance and implement a lot of solutions that have been identified in a study dedicated to that. Another thing which will be new in the CB, of course, if confirmed, is that now there is an agreement between the Commission and the private sector to add another advisory body on top of the existing scientific committee that some of you knows quite well, I think. We have also a state representative group, but now there is an agreement to create a third advisory body, which is called a deployment group. And the purpose of this deployment group is to address the area that were not covered enough by the BBI, which is in particular the participation of some subsectors, really actors in the value chain, but also regions and some feedstock that were not covered enough. So this body will have an advisory role, but also a monitoring role, because that's also the idea to have behind it very clear and strong objective. And you know that what gets measured gets done. That's what it's supposed to be.
Absolutely. Thanks, Philippe. Yeah, it sounds very interesting. Yeah, the more stakeholders you have cooperating, then the better you have inclusion. Lena, do you want to come in?
Yeah. It's very important that we do this because we have had a lot of research invested in Europe and nationally, which are going horizontal, primary, work with primary, and so on. We need the value chain approach for collaboration. And what is the incentive? We really, I'm drawing on my 20 years in private sector. We need the primary sector's expertise in order to ensure that the whole narrative of the sustainability of the new value chain products is actually a true story. We cannot have a biodiversity ruining or polluting or whatever, which is not a convincing story. That's for the past, not for the future. So for sustainability, we need it, but we also need it for security of supply. And we definitely need it for the new, so important that we need the farmers and the fishery and the forestry people to actually provide the high quality needed for the high value products which comes out of biomass conversion here in the modern days.
Great, Lena, thanks very much. And I suppose that segues nicely into Yvonne, because, Yvonne, building natural capital ecosystems into an evolving bioeconomy, that's really critical. And I'm hearing it that the market is now demanding this, this sustainability. It's the consumers, the young millennials, etc., that are driving those market changes. Yvonne?
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Sorry.
Yeah. No, I just wanted to come in on the question of how we can enhance collaboration at all levels of the bioeconomy with regards to sustainability. And I think here that payments to farmers for what they're producing in addition to the raw materials is really critical here to ensure that balance between the different ecosystem services that are provided from a farm or a forest or a seascape. And those payments can come in the form of, well, I think it's critically important that these payments come in the form of results-based payments. So farmers are clearly, and fishers and foresters are clearly given an objective. So it's to, produce more of whatever natural capital stock or a better quality of a natural capital stock that is required for those ecosystem services. And something that Philippe said really resonated with me, which was what gets measured gets done. We need to have natural capital accounts so that we know what it is that we have. We know how those might get degraded, or we know how they can be improved, for the raw materials for the bioeconomy, but also the other ecosystem services that are provided. And those additional payments can come through regulation to achieve national or EU policy, through social license to operate, where the manufacturers put pressure on or incentivize the producers to produce products in a way that gives them a social license to operate. And consumer demand here is critically important as well. If we are choosing the products which come from more sustainable sources and which haven't just got greenwashed, but which have verifiable natural capital accounts attached to them, and then those are all really important ways of getting that benefit back to the producers and incentivizing them to really operationalize this natural capital approach.
Very good. Thanks very much. And that's very interesting because it resonates also with what Marcel said earlier, that, you have large brands that are now putting pressure on their suppliers to say, you must go bio-based. And the next step is you must go bio-based, and it has to involve natural capital. It has to promote biodiversity, not just keep it the same, but actually enhance it. So there's huge opportunities there. But maybe I just want to come to John and Oana on, you know, there's a lot of talk about the bioeconomy and mitigating climate change, but, you know, there's also about adapting to climate change. So how does, John, can you put on your video and then we can connect you? So how does agriculture, how does the bioeconomy help the future bioeconomy? How can you help a bioeconomy to be sustainable? Because climate change is happening, and with the best will in the world, we are trying to slow that down, but climate change is happening. So how does the bioeconomy adapt to climate change? How are we actually going to create a sustainable bioeconomy that adapts to climate change? John or Oana, can you come in?
Yes, I'm not sure if my video is working there.
But I can hear you. I can hear you. Go ahead, John. Yeah.
Okay. I think what we've been talking about today is about a new destination, which is in terms of trying to make this transition, which is now certain, which is set out in the Green Deal, where we say we are not discussing anymore whether we're going somewhere, we are going there. So the conditions are there, climate neutral economy, society working within planetary boundaries. And it requires the things people have been talking about, you know, policy coherence, regulatory certainty, market signals, incentives, the ability to de-risk and demonstrate with low-cost capital, and economics that's refashioned to address some of the things that Yvonne has been talking about, and to measure the actual dimensions of what have to be measured in terms of what you said, Kevin, which is a long-term set of pathways to resilience. There's another key element to this, which is decision-making. And decision-making, to go back to the point that Natalie was making about involving farmers and so forth, the kind of changes that we're going to have to make by design is going to require involving people in being able to think about different kind of decisions. So, you know, to make very practical, what is the value of what we call natural capital here to people if you have to decide between, you know, water and energy and housing and rural communities and so forth. But when we talk about climate adaptation, you're talking about the point I made at the beginning about this reconciliation between the biosphere, the economy, and indeed society. What we can see is that the inescapable changes that are now ahead will come together to form the most systemic set of challenges that we have to make at both political, economic, and ecological levels. So, how are we going to continue generating, let's imagine that we had all the answers to a sustainable bioeconomy that we've been talking about this morning. How are we going to do this if there's a massive problem with water in the central food producing parts of Europe, where also a lot of the inland shipping of our industrial products moves, which is what is going to happen within the next few years? How are we going to operate if the way in which we use land directly or indirectly is going to have to deal with extreme weather circumstances, the assumptions that we have about biomass availability, about the conditions in which it operates that are going to be there? How are we going to deal with the what we're now living through is the first of the public health consequences of living in a world where our understanding of how, you know, life forms and the economy and people is not properly understood or managed or all that. So climate adaptation is going to require a new way of thinking in the long term about how these different systems that we're talking about can identify risk and bring the solutions to bear. So, for example, we're creating a mission on climate adaptation and societal transformation as one of the big lead-ins to Horizon Europe, and we'll be discussing it at the Research and Innovation Days, where I hope everybody comes digitally in September. But what we're talking about are very practical things. How are we going to have a decision-making where people can decide big things about how will where they live look, function, deliver value, protect and defend their ways of life, their economy, and the natural balance and all of that. So there's a whole area of decision making. And I think the bioeconomy is is a pathfinder in this regard, because it is a whole structured space where we're trying to think about a collective number of sectors, value chains, communities, the three aspects of sustainability, setting directions and applying technology and research and the exchange of data and solutions to test and demonstrate what the destinations could look like. And I think climate adaptation is going to fundamentally call into question a number of the assumptions that we think are options on the table, which are not, which is why how we account for things and which choices we make in terms of what kind of biomass we use and what kind of value and how people are involved in that as an economy and as a democracy, which is going to be the central question in how we make this transition, can be done. So if you think the bioeconomy is complex, I look forward to having this conversation in the context of what decisions we have to take on turning left and right, where we live, where we work, where we interact with our planet, on adapting to the realities of, unfortunately, an inescapably changed planet. Even if we make the changes that we expect to make on decarbonisation, there's a time lag in terms of some of the issues that we've already undertaken. I hope that is sufficiently uplifting for all of you as we head into our lunchtime session. Thank you.
Okay, and I apologize, and I don't have time because I have to shut the session, so I apologize that I have to leave John with the last word, which is appropriate, maybe. And I want to thank all the speakers, but really, you know, what I'm hearing is we have to have inclusive partnership, we have to incentivize behavioral change, we need policy coherence, we need a long-term view, and we need the decision-making tools to have that just transition. So I want to thank all of the speakers and thank everybody for joining the session, and I'll close the session now. So thanks very much, everybody.